No BS intro, let's begin this Java tutorial right away. So when we program in Java, we have something called variables, and this is exactly like how we're used to seeing in math. Math, we have variables that have some specific value, and that's exactly the same when it comes to variables in Java. When we're declaring a variable, or when we're first creating a variable, we need to specify the data type. And what a data type is, it's the type of variable you have. So if you're writing a number, we have to specify that it's an integer. If we have a string with characters or letters or whatnot, we need to specify that it's a string, and so on and so forth. So if you go on Google and type in the various different data types available when you're making variable, you will find a list of them, and you can utilize those here. So we're going to start off with an integer. So let's say we want two variables, x and y, where we can add them up, subtract them, divide them, and do a whole bunch of math operators with them. How would we do that? So first we declare the data type int and write x is equal to 10. Congratulations, you just wrote your first line in Java. And one thing that you have to realize is that the line ends with a semicolon. That's how you tell Java that you just finished a line. Now, if we want to make a second variable, we just change up the variable name and the value itself. So we will put x is equal to 10 and y is equal to 2. Now, what if we want to print this to the screen? All we have to do is write capital SYSTEM system.out.println. I said capital for a reason. You must put a capital. You must write this how it is. There's no slang in Java. You cannot use shortcuts. You have to write system.out.print. Next, we're simply going to write x inside of the brackets. And let's see what happens. We get the value 10. So if we want to add x and y together, well, you guessed it, we're going to put plus y, and let's see what this spits out. And this says 12. Now, if we wanted to subtract them, we do the same thing, but we're just going to change the plus to a minus. There are a lot of mathematical operators, and if you want a list of them, you can just literally go on Google and search them up, and all the different operations will come up, operators. So if we want to multiply them, we write an asterisk, and if we want to divide the numbers, of course, we're going to write a slash. And let's print out all this, and we see that it's 12, 8, 20, and then 5. So that's how you print to a screen and you do mathematical operations. Congratulations, you just finished your very first concept in programming. And this is a very important concept, and it will make your life easier when it comes to different programs that you want to write. Say, for example, you want to build a calculator, you have to utilize the math operations. Now, there's a special operation called the modulus. What modulus basically does is it takes the remainder of two numbers and it prints it out. Let's say we want to utilize this modulus operator, and instead of x and y, we're going to use the values 5 mod 2. Now, what does this print out? If we take 5 divided by 2, we get 2.5. Now, since there's 1 left over, because 2 goes into 5 twice, and 5 minus 4 is 1, this is going to print out 1. And remember, the modulus operator is just the percent sign. So let's print that out, and we get a 1. How is this applicable to a real life situation? So let's say we want to find if a number is even or odd. So if we take the number mod 2, which is short form for modulus, we will see that it either prints out 1 or 0. If it prints out 0, then it's, of course, an even number. If it prints out 1, it's an odd number. All these concepts are linked to an endless amount of possibilities. The only limitation is your imagination. You can do so much with just 1 or 2 concepts. Now, let's move on to conditional statements. So what are conditional statements? It's literally just code that executes depending on some condition. So when we want to go outside, for example, we have to check the weather. If it's raining, we're going to pack an umbrella. If it's not, we're not going to pack an umbrella. That's basically a conditional statement that we're doing in real life. Now, how would we translate that to code? So there's a special type of data, or there's a special data type called a Boolean. And this literally just means either a true or a false variable. So we can set a variable Let's say, for example, if we want to make a Boolean, we write the word Boolean, and we're going to make raining is equal to true. That's how you define a Boolean variable, and you have to write either true or false. We could have also wrote false, but in this case, we're just going to write true. Now, when we're making an if statement, the first thing you have to do is write if with circular regular brackets followed by 2 curly braces. What this basically says is you're going to have the condition inside these 2 initial brackets, and the rest of the code, the thing that you want to execute or run, is going to be inside the curly braces. Java is notorious for these curly braces, but you will soon realize how this is very useful because it keeps your program very organized and it just looks aesthetically pleasing. So let's go ahead and write if raining is equal to true. No, I did not make a mistake. Equal just compares the 2 values. So if raining is equal to true, then we will write system.out.println, and in here we are going to print out a string. So we're just going to print out a message. So we can type whatever we want in these 2 quotations, but you have to realize that you have to remember to surround this message with double quotations or else it will not work. So let's go ahead and write pack an umbrella. Now, we only have 2 possibilities. You either have a true or a false. That's the benefit of, or that's the property of a Boolean. It's either true or false, 1 or 0. So when we're writing an if, what we can say here is if this is not true, then we write another condition. So in this case, if raining is equal to false, then we're going to print out don't pack an umbrella. How do we write this? So since there's only 2 possibilities, we're going to write the keyword else. And this literally just translates to everything else besides the very first condition. And here, we're going to write the same thing, just with kind of a twist. Don't pack an umbrella. Let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So of course it says pack an umbrella because it sees that raining is in fact equal to true, and it prints out pack an umbrella. Now what if we set this to false? You guessed it, it's going to say don't pack an umbrella. Now, what if we have more than one condition? What if this wasn't a Boolean? So let's say, for example, well, let's redefine a variable. Let's call it int speed is equal to, let's say, 25. So now this is where it gets interesting. We're no longer just going to have this else statement. We're also going to have an else if statement. And you will see exactly what I mean here. So let's say, for example, if this person, this is a car speed, and they're traveling 25 kilometers an hour. If the speed, now we're going to introduce the idea of logical operators. So we can check if the value is less than or equal to another value, just less than a value, greater than a value, or greater than equal to a value. And there's a lot of logical operators. You can also find that chart online. You need to memorize these in order to make your coding more efficient and fast. So let's see. If speed is, let's say, for example, less than or equal to 20, we're going to print out please speed up because they're going too slow. Now, what if we want to have 2 logical operators that says if the value or if the speed is between the values 21 and 25? How would we do it? So we're going to write an else if statement, and this literally just means if this condition isn't met, you go to the else if statement. So else, so if it's not that, you go to this if statement. So right here, we are going to utilize the else if statement. So here, we're going to check if the speed is in between 2 values. So how will we do that? So let's say we want the values to be between 21 and 25 inclusive of both. So how can we utilize this? We can write else if, so this just translates to if not this first condition, you go into the second condition. So else if not this, then you go into last. So So if not this, you go into this condition. And then you can have several else if statements. So let's put the values in. So if we want speed has to be greater than or equal to 21, and that's how we write the values and. So both conditions must be met. We could also write or, but this won't work, and it's because if we use an or statement, either or has to be true. So let's say speed is, okay, first let me write this out. So speed has to be less than or equal to 25. And then we're going to write, so why won't this work? If we have an or statement, either or has to be true. So this condition, if we write, say for example, 25 million, this condition is still met because speed is greater than 21. So it's going to print out you are going the speed limit. So we need an AND operator because both conditions must be true. So if we write 2500, then speed is greater than or equal to 21, but it's no longer less than or equal to 25. So it goes to this else. So let's see this in action. Let's put 26 in here, and we will print this out, and it says, slow down, you're going too fast. But if we were to utilize an OR statement, then it will say you are going the speed limit because 26 is greater than or equal to 21. As soon as Java sees that that's true, it prints out. So that's the difference between an and an OR operation. These are important logical operators that you must know. So we now move on to the idea of strings, and what strings are, it's a data type that equals to some message or a bunch of characters surrounded by double quotations. So let's define a string. So we're going to need to define the data type. So we have string, let's say we have greeting is equal to hello world. So this is how we define a string. Now what we can do with this is we can print this out, and let's see how that works. So it says hello world, so it just prints out everything in the quotations. So you can print out anything inside of the double quotations. So you can put in an asterisk, an exponential sign, a dollar sign. You can print out all these, and it will print out exactly that. So you just have to remember that the characters must be inside of these double quotations. So what can we do with the string? So we now move on to loops. And what a loop does, it basically prints out code several times repeatedly depending on some condition. So we have two major loops. We have the for loop and the while loop. So let's go ahead and define a for loop. So within the for loop, we're going to have three major components. Well, three components. And here, in the very first component, we have to declare some variable. Usually, we write int I is equal to 0. And what this does, it defines the variable I equal to 0. And then we separate the conditions with a semicolon. And the second part of the for loop, we have to write some condition that must be met in order for the program to keep on running. So let's say we want I is less than 5. And the second part of the loop will have some incrementer or decrementer. So we change the value of I, or else this loop will just execute forever because 0 is always less than 5. So here we're going to increase I by 1 each time, and this is known as an incrementer. This just adds 1 to I. In here, we're going to write, let's see how many times this prints out. So as you can see, it prints out 5 times because we started at 0. And since we start at 0, that counts as the first iteration or the first loop. And so it just keeps on going until it reaches 5. Well, until it goes to 4, and then once it goes to the very top, it adds 1 more to 4, and that becomes 5. And this condition is no longer met, so it just exits out of the loop. So what exactly is happening? So when we initialize I is equal to 0, it sees that I is less than 5. That's true, so that's why it prints out once. It does that again because it goes to the top, it adds 1 to I, and then it prints out hello. And so we now have 1 is less than 5, which is true. It does that for 2, 3, 4, and then once it goes to 4, it goes to 5, and it adds 1, so it becomes 5, and it no longer holds true, and so it breaks out of the loop. So this does get kind of messy because we introduce the idea of nested loops in the future, but stick with me and you'll understand what that is and how that can be utilized in a real life situation. So now we will cover a while loop. So let's say, for example, we have int count is equal to 5. So in a while loop, you don't declare a variable inside of the loop itself. So here we're going to write while, and inside the curly braces, we're going to have the code that we want to run. So in here, this just directly translates to while this condition is met, execute something. So here we're going to have while count is, let's say, less or greater than or equal to 0. We're going to print out hello world. So if I ran this right now, it would be an infinite loop because the value count is always greater than or equal to 0. So we need to decrease this value somehow. So what we can do is write count is equal to count minus 1, and this is a lot of code. We don't want to write that much code, so all we can do is write count minus minus, and that is a decrementer. It just decreases count by 1. Remember when in the for loop we had I plus plus, which just adds 1 to I. So let's see how many times this gets printed out. So this gets printed out 6 times because we have this equal sign. If we just had a greater sign, as soon as it goes to 1, it decreases by 1, and then 0 is no longer greater than 0, it's equal to 0, so it exits out of the loop. Here, 5 is just decreased every single time by 1, and so we go to 4, and then it prints it out. 3, it prints it out. 2, 1, 0, and then once it goes to 0, it subtracts 1 to count, and then we now have negative 1 is greater than or equal to 0. That's no longer true, so it skips everything inside of the loop and it exits. So that is why it prints out 6 times. If you want more practice with this, go ahead and mess around with the conditions. Make another variable, add to the variable count. See what happens and just mess around with this, and soon everything will start to click. We now move on to user input. So user input utilizes a scanner class, and I will talk about classes in the future in my object-oriented programming video, but in order to access this class, we must import the package. And what a package is, it's conceptually like a folder inside your laptop, because a folder can have pictures, music, documents, and so on and so forth. So you're getting class-specific things. So let's go ahead and import this. So what we're going to write is import java.utils.scanner. This is basically just importing a package, and you don't have to worry about this right now. Let's make an object of the class, and this will make more sense when I talk about object-oriented programming, but right now it's going to seem a bit confusing, but just bear with me. So we're going to take the word scanner, and we're going to write the variable or the scanner name. So input is equal to new scanner, and inside the scanner brackets we're going to write system.in. Now we have to give the user some prompt so that they know what they're typing in. So let's write, so here we're going to ask the user to write some username. So when we utilize a scanner, we need to make a variable that can hold the value that the user put in into this username prompt. And so we're going to do this. So a username is a string because they can have numbers and characters inside of them. So we're going to write string username is equal to the name of the scanner dot next line. This just means take the username, put it inside the variable username, and set it equal to that value. So now we can print out the value of username. So let's say we want to print out your username is plus username. And this is called concatenating a string. You're basically just adding the string at the very end to another string. So let's go ahead and print this out and see how this works. So let's write sium dat. And now it prints out your username is sium with all those numbers. And so that is how you utilize a scanner, and you can take user input. We now move on to arrays, and arrays are just a list of values of the same data type that are inside of a list. So it's basically a way of organizing these values. So let's say we want to declare an array, and we want the array to hold the values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How would we do this? So in order to declare an array, we must specify the data type, and since they're all numbers, we're going to write int, and we can name it whatever we want. So for this video, I'm just going to write int arr, and followed by square brackets. So that just tells Java that we're going to be defining an array. So in here, we're going to manually input all the values. So we have curly braces, and inside the curly braces, we have to separate the values by commas. So we're going to input the values just manually. And now the array arr has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now what can we do with this array? We can now access the elements inside of the array. But you have to realize that when you're finding the position of a number or an item in the array, the very first position starts at 0, and this is known as the index value. So index starts at 0. And this is very important because intuitively we assume that the very first value is going to be at position 1. That's not true. In Java, you have to realize that this is position 0, this is position 1, 2, and so on. So let's say we want to print out the very first item in our array. How can we do that? So we are just going to type in arr with square brackets and just type in whatever index value or whatever position value. So in this case, we want the very first number, so we're going to print out 0. And so let's print this out, and it's going to print out 1. Now let's say we want to access the very last number. How can we do this? Well, the very last number is at position n-1. So we look at how many characters there are. So there are 5, minus 1, which is 4. So the very last character or the very last item is going to be 4. So we print out 5. So this can become very useful because arrays have a lot of different functions. We can go through an array by looping through them with the for loop, and let me show you how we can do that. So let's write a for loop, and I'm just going to speed through this because I already covered what for loop is. And then I is less than. Now there's a special function that comes with arrays. You can directly get the length of the array. If the array had, let's say for example, 2,346,000 characters, we're not going to count every single one of them. So all we can do is write arr, or the name of the array, dot length. It just gets the entire length of the array. And then we're going to write, and now we're going to write I++, and we're going to print out every single individual number. So let me write the values as 30, 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So we don't get confused with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's also the values of the index. So in order to print out every single individual number, remember, in order to access them, we have to write the position value. So will it make sense to only write I? No, of course not. It's just going to print out 0 all the way until 4. Let me show you. This will print out 0 until 4 because of the for loop. In order to access the position values, we are going to write arr, so the name of the array, and then we're going to pass in the value I. And so initially it becomes print out the value at position 0, and then position 1, and 2, 3, 4, because we're adding 1 to I each time. So now it's going to print out 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So here, there's a lot of different things that you can do with arrays. You can now add up all the array values, which I will be covering in the future. You can have a 2D array where you can map out the position of X and Y coordinates. And that itself is a very good real-life application of programming. So we covered a fair deal of Java. We went over strings, how to do arithmetic operations. We covered logical operators, arrays, and data types and variables, and so many different things. And with just this knowledge, you can start making a lot of programs. I really hope this was informative, and if it was, please let me know and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and comment. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorials.